I want to get back to something that I mentioned in my opening statement and that other members have mentioned here, and that's the cost. One of the reasons I want to get back to it, Mr. Secretary, is because you didn't mention it in your opening statement, and that caught my attention. And in London this week, Secretary Clinton mentioned there was discussion about financial assistance to the transitional government, to the transitional council, I think is the way the terminology you use. What's envisioned in that sense?
Congressman, at this point, the assistance we've given has been humanitarian assistance. We've given about $47 million in humanitarian assistance. On the military side, I know Secretary Gates is testifying this morning, and I would defer to him on what the military costs are.
I've seen those figures.
In terms of going forward, this is a conversation that we are having with the Transition National Council in terms of what might be appropriate assistance. We made no commitments. We need to understand better what they are, and obviously this is something that we will continue to consult with you as the opportunity emerges.
Well, I appreciate that, but what steps is the administration prepared to take to facilitate access, basically to seize the $33 billion in assets that Gaddafi has here, that Libya has here in the United States?
Congressman, under the Security Council resolution, the assets that we have frozen are frozen for the benefit of the Libyan people.
Well, this is my concern. I mean, you got two ways to do that. You could facilitate access to proceeds from new oil sales, or you could access these, these assets. But let me ask you another question along that line. We've got other coalition partners here, the Arab League. What commitment have they made? And I say that because we're looking at a budget deficit of $1.6 trillion for this year. We're borrowing 42% of everything that we spend here in Washington. This is why I was pushing early on for sort of an alternative approach, jamming his communication system, which we didn't do at the time, so that Gaddafi could not 4 weeks ago communicate with the troops when they were defecting, rather than an expensive proposition. We've seen this before. I remember pushing jamming in Yugoslavia and broadcasting in Yugoslavia before the election. Milosevic came that close to being defeated by Panish. Had we done what was in the legislation, had it gone through, we could have affected the outcome. We could have jammed the broadcasting of Taliban radio in Afghanistan all of those years. We also could have done our own broadcasting in with Radio Free Afghanistan. That legislation passed only after Massoud was killed. So what I'm pointing out is there's a lack of understanding here in terms of cost-effective ways to do diplomacy or to change governments, and there is a tendency to forget about how we're going to collect the check after we've left. I think we've proved that if we don't get that set up front, it's not going to happen. And that's why, could assets be used to repay the U.S. Treasury for war costs? I guess that's the question. Could they?
I think, let me answer two parts of your question. First, because you did raise the jamming issue, and I didn't want to seem like we were avoiding that. What I can say in this session is that we are doing some of it.
You're doing it now 4 weeks later. You started, by the way, the former government started the bombing, started the broadcasting into Yugoslavia, by the way, the day of the bombing. We started the broadcasting under my legislation in Afghanistan only after Massoud's death and the day before the bombing. We wait too late. There is a time which taken, at the brink leads to a decisive move, especially when you're talking about jamming your opposition when his generals are defecting. The Defense Secretary has said the military operations have been planned, I read this in the paper, on the fly. I hope this cost question isn't being dealt with the same way, because, again, that's how you get stuck with the check. And I haven't got a definitive answer here that commits the administration to the idea that we're not going to get stuck with a check.
I do want to address that part of your question, too. First of all, I very much take your point about the fact that while some countries are contributing by providing planes or other kinds of support, there is an opportunity for other countries that are not doing that to provide financial support. And we're very conscious of that and very much engaged with other countries to make sure that they find a way to support them.
I think I'm going to come back with legislation on this, because
Thank you,
I
Mr.
don't